Government unveils national anthem law. Lawmakers demand Beijing explain itself following reports it spied on Hong Kong-based journalists as a favour to Malaysia. And Trump appeals to the American people over the need for a border wall.
Good evening and welcome. The government is recommending a maximum of 3 years in jail for those who insult the national anthem. The new rule would also give authorities up to 2 years to prosecute people accused of denigrating the song. But some lawmakers say they are not comfortable with how the legislation was drafted. Caleb Leung has our top story.
The era when anyone could freely meddle with the national anthem is nearly over. Today, the government introduced the National Anthem Bill, which includes legislation to ban insults to the anthem. The government insists these laws do not infringe on the public's right to freedom of expression and speech.
I think we need to make clear that the freedom of expression and freedom of speech are not without boundary. You are still entitled to your views and your expression, but not in this format or not in this form. So I think this concept is very clear.
The bill contains provisions related to the playing and singing of the national anthem, such as when the anthem should be played. It also includes laws to protect the anthem, such as banning insulting behavior. Offenders could face a maximum penalty of 3 years imprisonment and $50,000 fine. The prosecution time period for these laws are also extended from 6 months to 2 years from the date of the offense.
There may be circumstances that there may be involved a number of people in committing the offense. And to allow sufficient time for the police to investigate and also to institute the prosecution, probably we need more than 6 months. And that's why we come up with these proposals.
Some lawmakers expressed concerns on how the bill was drafted.
The wordings that we've seen from this bill, especially the definition of insult, is actually very subjective and very unclear. What is meant by insulting the national anthem is something that would undermine the dignity of the national anthem. But what is undermining the dignity of the national anthem? That is extremely unclear.
The government plans to gazette the bill on Friday, while LegCo's first reading of the bill is expected to take place in exactly 2 weeks from now, on the 23rd. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
There are now calls for Beijing to explain whether mainland officials offered to have reporters based in Hong Kong put under surveillance back in 2016. This was allegedly aimed at a team of Wall Street Journal reporters who were working on the corruption case of Malaysian state fund 1MDB.
I'm very concerned with the report, which allege there may be illegal or improper tapping, monitoring or interference of communication of a Hong Kong journalist. If it is an official conduct, official act or act of state, I urge the central government to review its decision and to take into account the interests of one country, two systems.
The Wall Street Journal yesterday reported China offered to spy on its Hong Kong-based journalists on the 1MDB story. Yesterday, Security Chief John Lee declined to comment on that case. He did say only local law enforcement can exercise their rights here on crime prevention or during an investigation, especially when public safety is concerned.
Search operations continue in the waters off Lamma Island, where an oil tanker caught fire yesterday. 2 crew members remain missing while more than 20 were rescued yesterday. The vessel is still listed. The Fire Services Department has reportedly sent 6 officers to board the stricken boat to investigate. The Vietnam-registered ship caught fire following an explosion on board. It took firefighters 5 hours to put out the fire.
The US trade delegation has left China after wrapping up talks that extended to an unscheduled third day. Ted McKinney, US Undersecretary of Agriculture for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs, says the talks went just fine without elaborating. Negotiations were extended by a day amid signs of progress. These included Chinese purchases of US farm and energy commodities, as well as increased American access to China's markets. The prolonged talks fueled optimism that the two sides can strike a deal and avoid an ugly fallout that would severely disrupt the global economy. That sentiment drove up Asian stock markets, with Shanghai shares closing up 0.7%, while the Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong gained more than 2%.
The United Nations has asked Australia to consider refugee resettlement for an 18-year-old Saudi woman who fled to Thailand. Rahaf Mohammed Al-Kunoon arrived in Bangkok on Saturday seeking asylum. She said she would be abused or even killed by her family if she was returned. She became international news after sending a message over social media pleading her case from a hotel room in the transit area of Bangkok's airport. Australian authorities said they would consider the referral in the usual way. Thai immigration officials, meanwhile, say Al-Kunoon has refused to meet with family members who are now in Bangkok. They said her father and brother arrived yesterday, but Al-Kunoon did not meet with them.
US President Donald Trump went on national television with a plea for $5.7 billion in funds for a border wall with Mexico. But he offered little in the way of new ideas to break the standoff that has left large swaths of the government shut down for almost 3 weeks. Alan Thuckner reports.
Using the formal trappings of the Oval Office, Trump again said the border wall is needed to keep out illegal drugs and criminals.
Over the years, thousands of Americans have been brutally killed by those who illegally entered our country, and thousands more lives will be lost if we don't act right now. This is a humanitarian crisis, a crisis of the heart and a crisis of the soul.
Trump did not declare a state of emergency as many had expected, so he could bypass Congress and build the wall. But he again blamed the Democrats for the government shutdown.
The only solution is for Democrats to pass a spending bill that defends our borders and reopens the government. This situation could be solved in a 45-minute meeting. I have invited congressional leadership to the White House tomorrow to get this done.
But the Democrat leaders again urged Trump to separate the border funding from the government shutdown. They accused Trump of overblowing the situation.
Most presidents have used Oval Office addresses for noble purposes. This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis, stoke fear, and divert attention from the turmoil in his administration.
There was mixed reaction from people who watched the address in southern Texas, a short distance from the U.S.-Mexico border.
So when he talks of a wall, I think it's border security, and there's different facets to border security, but we definitely need it, so I'm completely behind him 100%.
I heard his rhetoric for now 2 years, that he preferred that Norwegians apply for immigration here in the United States. That makes me feel like we're second-rate citizens.
Trump plans a visit to the border on Thursday as he continues to pitch one of his 2016 signature campaign promises. Alan Bucknia, TVB News.
British lawmakers have backed an opposition amendment to a bill that would set up roadblocks to make a no-deal Brexit more difficult. Nearly 24 Tories rebelled against their ruling Conservative Party to support the measure, which is largely seen as symbolic. Jeff Tang reports.
Britain is still leaving the European Union on March 29th, no matter what. But lawmakers put up a symbolic fight to show that they will not accept a no-deal Brexit, which many fear will lead to widespread economic damage.
The ayes to the right, 303. The noes to the left, 296. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock.
This vote passed an opposition amendment to the finance bill that limits spending on preparations for a no-deal Brexit unless authorised by Parliament. The government's narrow defeat was aided by the 20 Tories who rebelled against the ruling Conservative Party and highlights May's weak position as a leader of a minority government. Some of the mutineers include former cabinet ministers Michael Fallon and Justine Greening. It means the government now needs explicit parliamentary approval to leave the EU without a deal before the Treasury can raise certain taxes. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn hailed the development as an important step towards preventing a no-deal Brexit. The Labour leader tweeted, "It shows that there is no majority in Parliament, the Cabinet or the country for crashing out of the EU without an agreement." While the measure does not have the power to block a no-deal Brexit, supporters say it sets a precedent that the government cannot ignore. This was perhaps an outcome that the government had already expected. Shortly before the vote, Downing Street said a defeat would be inconvenient rather than significant. That's because the government has other mechanisms at its disposal to raise money. It comes as Parliament prepares to resume debate on May's proposed Brexit deal later today. Her unpopular divorce plan is due to be voted on next week, a month after she postponed it to avoid a near-certain defeat. Jeff Tang, TVB News.
And still to come tonight. Government pathologist says Howard Lam probably injured himself. Constitutional Affairs Secretary says Hong Kong in no position to relaunch political reform.
每一杯拉花，每一份心意，由咖啡師親手調配，有玫瑰，仲有瑞士蓮 Lindo 軟心朱古力，送俾你嘅 McCafe 全新玫瑰系列。
Welcome back to TVB News. A court was told today the evidence suggests that Democratic Party member Howard Lam probably injured himself instead of being abducted and hurt by mainland agents, as he earlier claimed. Sharon Tang has more.
Lam's trial continued at the West Kowloon Magistracy today. The Democratic Party member denies a charge of knowingly making a false report to a police officer. Back in 2017, he made public an alleged abduction in Yau Ma Tei, in which he was drugged and tortured. Testifying at the court today was senior forensic pathologist from the Department of Health, Lai Sai Chak. He said the parallel and symmetrical scars on Lam's abdomen were caused by beating from almost the same direction. Lai added people who perform self-injury often aim for ways that are convenient, inflict less pain, and that the injuries could be easily seen. As for the staples allegedly punched on Lam's thighs, the expert said he has never seen such wounds that are cross-shaped, symmetrical and with 5 on each side. He noted that people who harm themselves are normally pleased afterwards, which might explain why Lam went home directly instead of seeking medical help. Also, Lam claimed he was tied up and knocked out. But the expert said blood test results couldn't show he had inhaled volatile gases such as chloroform. He highlighted that Lam would have struggled if he was knocked out by that, but no such signs were found on his body. The expert added that he thought Lam's injuries were severe until he only noticed scars on his abdomen and thighs. He stressed that all sorts of medical evidence indicate Lam had simply made up the story and injured himself. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
The government stressed today it's important to follow Beijing's framework when it comes to universal suffrage in Hong Kong. An official added that only when society reaches a consensus can the government relaunch the political reform process. Caleb Long reports.
It's not the right time to relaunch political reform in Hong Kong. That's according to the city's top constitutional affairs official when a lawmaker asked whether the government would consider it.
Whether it will consider fresh launching expeditiously public consultation on the methods for selecting CE in 2022 and for forming LegCo in 2020, as well as commencing the 5-step process. Rashly saying discussions on political reform will lead to social conflicts or even lead to some people resorting to extreme action affecting the development of Hong Kong. Rather than acting rashly, it is imperative for the SAR government to prudently consider all related factors, size up the situation, seek consensus, and work towards a favorable atmosphere.
Nip also stressed the importance of the framework that Beijing has set out for the SAR in terms of universal suffrage. He says it's important for society to reach a consensus on that framework.
If we are to restart constitutional reform or further promote its development, this is a starting point. If we cannot even reach a consensus on this fundamental legal basis, I don't see how we are in a position to further our reform proposal.
Caleb Leung, TVB News.
A transport department says new guidelines will soon be in place in the coming months to limit the working hours of bus drivers. But providing drivers with a 3-hour break during a special shift will not be part of the new rules. Christy Leung with details.
Buses are the second major forms of transport for daily commuters, carrying some 4 million passenger trips a day. On a radio show this morning, Transport Commissioner Mabel Chen said new guidelines will be implemented later this year to limit the working hours of bus captains. But it will not include the requirements to provide bus captains on special shift with a break of no less than 3 consecutive hours. To meet increased demand during peak hours, some bus drivers work a 14-hour shift. Yet, they are not guaranteed a 3-hour break in between rides. Chen said the department has to study the matter carefully. This as bus operators may have to hire around 1,500 more drivers to maintain their services if any changes are made to the special shift. You may not be able to find a seatbelt on all the bus models. The commissioner said it's no easy task to fit the fleets with passenger seatbelts, as it will bring extra weight to the vehicle, affecting its stability. So authorities will focus their revamp works on long-haul bus routes first. The department is also planning to set up low-speed zones of 30 km per hour in busy areas, such as Paddle Street in Central and Sham Shui Po. Christy Leung, TVB News.
A worker died after falling from a residential building in Diamond Hill this morning. It happened at around 9 a.m. in Bel Air Heights. It is believed the worker fell from height during a scaffolding job on a building. He was later certified dead at United Christian Hospital. The case is classified as an industrial accident and the Labour Department is looking into it.
Hong Kong has signed a memorandum with Japan to cooperate on issues related to arbitration and mediation.
Japan is an important and long-term partner of Hong Kong. Signing of the Memorandum of Cooperation is an encouraging step in furthering our legal cooperation and working relationship.
Chung added the city has been aiming to offer itself as an international hub of arbitration and mediation in the Asia-Pacific. Japanese Minister of Justice Takashi Yamashita said Japan shares with Hong Kong universal values such as respect for the rule of law.
And that's the news.